Okay. So for the class today, I did something unique and kind of strange. Um, there's a thing, there's a meditation. Um, I'm in the middle of a initiation right now for a specific technique, and it's gonna be occurring at 10 today, so in an hour. So what I did was I recorded like a 20-minute video so that so that it could play while I'm on the way there. So unfortunately, that's the format for today, but I am going to teach for the next 30 minutes, next 35 minutes, and then play that recording. And then for anyone that wants to meditate, the Zoom will be open, so you can still sit and practice and make use of the second hour. I will be sitting and practicing, so we can all be connected, but I'm just gonna leave the phone in the car. So, but besides that, next week and every Saturday will be normal. And the video that I just made, it explains the frame for meditation. Like, I thought this week we were going to get into the hindrances, but I think we should take it even more fundamental than that. So the frame was just about how to approach meditation, and that really this is about letting go and just allowing things to be. The more you're trying to control things or trying to attain this or to attain that, the more difficult this will become. And I'm speaking from the first 7 years of my practice on that point. It's really the separate self or the reactive mind that wants to attain something, or the separate self or the reactive mind that wants to change the present moment and make it better. So if you've noticed, there's this tendency that we have to always want things to be a little different. You know, we always want the present moment to just be a little better, a little more optimal. Even I do this if I'm on autopilot. Um, we're always shifting around. Like you have a physical position for one moment, your legs are crossed. 5 minutes later, you move. There's just like, if you notice it, there's just this constant attempt at physical, emotional, and mental equilibrium. Part of the difficulty with developing our meditation practice and really beginning to be able to sit and sit still is that we're up against that tendency for equilibrium that we're used to. We're very used to the absence of physical discomfort. So what's the thing that um, people often report when they're attempting to learn to meditate? Physical pain, physical discomfort. The body poses as the obstacle. There's numbness in the legs, there's pain in the legs, there's pain in the shoulders, and how how that is dealt with um, is useful, especially in the beginning. You don't want to shave against the grain. You don't want to move in the direction that's opposite to the river. At the same time, you don't want to be lazy and just like permit your body impulses to defeat you. Okay, so there are a couple terms that we need to and want to start with in all of this. Unfortunately, meditation terms and terms that are used in non-duality are used differently depending on who's talking about them, and they're often used interchangeably. And even in my case, I am guilty of this. I'm guilty of doing this kind of loose interchangeability of words in an attempt to um, basically cater to whoever it is that I'm speaking to. Like if I'm speaking to a group of non-practitioners or beginner practitioners, then I may use a different set of terms compared to if I'm speaking to people who have all been meditating for a while, like all of you have. So so let's start with the the factors or the conditions which generate the the sense of self, because this is the crux of the whole thing. When we enter samadhi, that falling away of self and selfing begins to occur as our enlightenment factors increase, like equanimity factor, all of this. So the terms that are used interchangeably and that we can just define here at the outset for functional purposes: attention, intention, awareness, mindfulness, and presence, or consciousness, right? So the sense of self is a conglomeration, or it's a actual um, like sense of self. It's a sense. We have the sense of being a self that is generated by those factors. Those nexus of conditions produce that. When you experience a state that is absent of those factors, the first thing that is noticeable when you emerge from that state, when you emerge either from a jhana of that depth or when you emerge from something like cessation, the first thing that is recalled is, whoa, there was no self there. And by that, there was no conceptual elaboration. So there was no thinking, there was no recognition of oneself, meaning there was no memory. So that is the first thing that is really discernible. You enter this thing, or enter the samadhi, or enter this deep state of meditation, you fall away, and then when you return, there's an actual noticeability of that, of the self having regenerated, and now you're looking back and reviewing the state that you just emerged from. So this refers to all states which are sufficiently deep, and that those factors that generate self had vanished or were not present at the time. So dreamless sleep is an example of one of these. So the basic terms: what is attention? Is a good question, and if I had time, I'd probably just let you guys run with this and provide me answers. But what is attention? Attention is a localization of perception. So let's say there's an abrupt sound that comes, like a car or a dog starts barking, and then bang. That aspect of the mind which attends to that sound, which is captured by that sound, is attention. So it's this uh, localizing function. I can place my attention on this object, I can place my attention on that object. It is really the localization of perception. So what is perception? Perception is purely that. Well, in Buddhism, it means two things. It means a couple of things, actually. So perception is related to memory. So to perceive something means to actually have a recognition of what it is. it's that act of perceiving, that act of receiving sense data on a given object. So in order for me to recognize this cup as a cup, one, there has to be the perception of the cup. So the receiving of that sense data, that's perception. And then there has to be the recollection that I know what this cup is. So perception and memory are considered the same aggregate in Buddhism. If you're not if you're not able to uh, if you don't have memory, then the incoming sense data is not is not interpreted. It's a really strange consideration to look at these mechanics, but if I'm receiving the sense data from looking at this cup and that perception as a faculty is there, but there's no memory of what I'm looking at, um, I mean, there's even an argument to be made that I wouldn't perceive the object at all. I mean, that's one thing that scientists have considered. That the only reason we perceive objects is because we have an apparatus and a memory to do so. There was a particular story. I don't know if this is absolutely true, but this is just an example that was given that when some of the conquistadors appeared in Central America, they came on their boats. People on the shore were not able to actually visibly perceive them initially. So, like something that's so far out of your reality that you have no basis for may be something that you don't perceive at all or that you don't remember at all. And this is actually a particular important notion in the development of samadhi and meditative states. So you have perception, meaning a reception of the incoming sense data. You have the memory to recognize what that sense data is. So intention is the application of any particular function in experience or any particular function in consciousness. So if attention is the localization of my perception, if I'm attending to this cup and then I'm attending to this bottle and now I'm attending to Nika's image, there's a function that exercises that shifting of attention if it's voluntary, and that is intention. So there's voluntary attention and involuntary attention. And this is also mentioned very much so in Culadasa's book, because this is the basis for meditative training. This is the basis for mindfulness. When a dog barks and my attention is captured by that dog, that is involuntary attention. Most of our uh, attention, how it moves, what it's engaged in, what it does, is involuntary. The meditative process is attempting to break that involuntary patterning of attention. So let's use an example of like um, an Instagram ad popping up, right? So the phone looks at all the things that you're interested in. You've been talking to your friends about you want an electronic toothbrush or something high powered, and then you get an ad for it, right? And that ad comes up, it captures your attention involuntarily, and then this whole chain of processing, this whole chain of events happens after that, and your attention and the intention that is required to actually buy that product all becomes conditioned by that initial advertisement and by the excitement that occurs. So that's happening a lot of the time. Not and we don't need to use advertisements as a clear as the only example. Like that seems a more obvious one, but a great deal of our desires, a great deal of our responses are conditioned in exactly the same way. It just doesn't seem so because it's more localized and personal, localized and personal to us. So, so for me to move my hand from here to here requires the exercising of intention. It is that driver behind a movement. So we can all demonstrate this here. Okay. It's called, I learned this is an exercise from Bruce Moen to get clear on the presence of intention or the faculty of intention. So now I want all of you to pay attention to your finger, your forefinger. So now you're noticing your just this one finger. So the fact that your perception is locked onto this is directed at this, that's attention. Okay. Now I want you to intend this finger to curl like this. Like keep moving it until it curls all the way down. Okay. So now the finger is curled, you're holding it with intention. And now uncurl it slowly and notice how to, even just to uncurl this finger very slowly, you have to intend to do it moment by moment. Okay. Now the finger's straight. Now just notice the finger, but now don't intend to do anything. Now curl the finger down again and notice the presence of intention, exercising of intention as you do it. And now release the finger. So if you had some kind of paralysis, okay, and you were attempting to curl this finger, the presence of intention would be firing, but the finger won't move. So that intention, that it's like a pressure. The connection between that pressure or that intention and the physical organ is disrupted in paralysis. So you want to move, but you can't. So if any of you have experienced sleep paralysis, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You intend to move or to get out of bed, but you can't. That force is intention. So intention intention is just that pushing or that firing of, yeah, intent. I don't know what other word. I should look it up in a thesaurus or something. But it's the combination of attention and intention that is the basis for the entire process of meditative training, which is why we did this simple exercise. Okay. So we're going to get into a couple more terms. What do we mean by awareness? Okay. What do we mean by awareness? There's there's awareness in becoming aware of an object, but that conventional term is the same as noticing something or paying attention to something. The conventional general definition of how the word awareness is used is, are you aware of, right? So the awareness is always directed at an object or something that you become aware or cognizant of. Okay. Now, in non-duality and in meditation language, it's the best way to put it. Awareness is often used as another word for consciousness. So there's a confusion in terms as a result of that, and because it's the meditation term of it is different than the conventional general term, there's confusion. So to become aware of something means to notice something in the general sense. But what we mean in meditation by the presence of awareness, yeah, yeah, yeah. What we mean by the presence of awareness is the faculty of being aware and being conscious turns on or is present. It's usually not present. So that means usually we're on autopilot. So I say the word awareness, okay? Let's all be aware now. Be aware, right? So now we're aware. Maybe 5 seconds ago, we weren't aware. Or 5 minutes ago, we weren't aware. But now you're being aware. So this presence of awareness will last about 30 seconds or something, or maybe a minute. And then you're back on autopilot. So this presence of conscious awareness is um, a faculty that emerges. It's similar to lucidity, but also not exactly the best example, and I'll explain why. So when you're in a dream and you recognize that you're dreaming, you become aware that you're dreaming, correct? So that noticing that you're dreaming is what breaks the uh, ordinary dream and turns it into a lucid dream. Now you're able to engage consciously with the dreamscape. So that's an example that dawning of the recognition of the dream that you're in a dream is what turns it lucid. Now, that's a result of knowing that you're dreaming. Whereas the visceral uh, presence of awareness is just the mind becoming conscious for a few seconds or a few minutes, depending on what your capacity is for this. So being aware, the presence of awareness, it's this faculty or mode that is entered, and then you get you fall out of it. So your mind really only has two modes. There's when you're aware, and then there's when there's no awareness. So most of the time, there's a absence of awareness. What is the difference between awareness and consciousness? Consciousness is uninterrupted and continuous. So like consciousness isn't something that is is coming or going. It's the most fundamental. You've never had an experience outside consciousness. You've never known consciousness outside consciousness. You've never experienced a reality outside consciousness. Consciousness, reality, experience, all three words for the same thing. Um, that takes further elaboration, but I think a lot of you have heard me explain that before. But so to get an idea of what we would designate consciousness as is like you fall asleep and you lose consciousness right when you fall asleep. And then when you wake up, consciousness turns on. That that which turns on the first thing in the morning, consciousness. That which turns off the last thing in the evening, consciousness. And that's present through the entirety of the day. Actually, it's even present when you're sleeping, but it takes clear light, yoga, and samadhi to realize that or to discover that. So notice how all day long there's consciousness, but all day long there's not necessarily the presence of awareness, meaning there's not necessarily the faculty of being conscious, of being aware, right? Now, the next term that is used in meditation is mindfulness. Mindfulness is when awareness that being conscious is directed at an object. Mindfulness of the body, mindfulness of breathing, mindfulness of an object, mindfulness of feeling, right? So it just means that fullness of mind, that presence of awareness is then directed at something. So when mindfulness is directed at an object, the enlightenment factors automatically become produced, like they begin to build. It's like a program. As soon as you set the program, which is noticing the breath or noticing loving kindness, then this whole mechanism begins to unfold. That's really what that's really what is occurring. How is mindfulness different from awareness? Awareness is referring to a a mode of consciousness. You're aware and then you're not aware, right? The awareness is present for a few seconds or a few minutes and then it goes. But when that awareness is present and then it is directed at an object, that is mindfulness. That is the dawn of mindfulness. Yeah. Mindfulness means being aware of something, whereas awareness refers to that faculty or that mode itself, right? Like you wouldn't, if we're referring to, uh, quote, my awareness, it wouldn't make sense to refer to mindfulness in the same way. Like if we're saying my mindfulness, that means we're purely talking about um, the presence of being mindful of an object either being there or being interrupted, for example, in the use of that term. My mindfulness uh, was broken. So if I'm, you know, referring to walking meditation and dogs started barking and it broke the continuity of mindfulness of my feet, for example, right? So mindfulness is a verb, whereas awareness is a noun. Mindfulness is an action, whereas awareness is a specific faculty. So, to get clear on awareness, dreams are perfect examples of states where there's no awareness. If there was awareness, it'd be a lucid dream. So that faculty is then what allows for the exercising of attention and intention in the dreamscape. If there's no awareness in the dream, how can you actually do anything intentionally? You see? So, and then I'll take this question. Yeah, I'll take this question. Already 9:32. God, I just never change. It just never. I never get this time thing. Okay, is intention attention scanning talked about in Culadasa's book? Des, can you ask this?
Yeah, sure. So when Culadasa talks about there's like three different types of attention. One's a stable attention, one's scanning, and one's getting captured. So I was just
Ah,
wondering if
yeah.
scanning is part of the intention part, or is intention completely separate from attention?
Um, so to intend to do something, attention has to be there, right? If you can't localize perception on something, the capacity to engage in action is not possible. So the reason, yeah, like they're different faculties, but they arise simultaneously in a given moment. So I'll give an example, like when you just talked about these three types of attention. I think scanning is voluntary. Um, what were the other two that you mentioned?
Stable attention,
Yeah,
that'll be voluntary as well, and then
yeah.
getting
Stable
captured.
attention is voluntary,
Yeah.
correct? Yeah,
Okay.
and then the other one's involuntary. So yeah, like to go back to this example with the finger, right? Like this isn't just an exercise you do one time. You can do this many times if to get clear on the presence of intention. The mind going to the finger and perceiving just the finger, that's attention. And then for me to move this is that push. That push is intention. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so like when you're pushing, you would be pushing intention for scanning. If you were scanning the room or whatever, that would be intention, but it would be the attention that was happening during it.
Yes, correct. Correct. Yeah.
Right.
Like to move the attention from one object to another requires intention,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's how that works. It seems like a really simple like super basic conversation on mechanics of experience.
Yeah.
But it's important
Yeah.
because when you see that these little, how these different parts of the mind interact and you see it clearly, you see how it's exactly these faculties that generate the sense of a doer. It's just these faculties: feeling, attention, intention, perception, awareness. You put these things together with, yeah, and they generate the sense of doership.
Yeah, I think the awareness part, when you throw that in there as well, that's kind of where it gets a little bit, feels like it gets a little bit kind of clunky for me.
What do you mean?
So like when you're, for example, if you're paying attention to your finger, you've got your attention on it, and then you've got intention. It would be what's aware of that intention and attention.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
correct,
Okay.
correct. Yeah, like I said, the difference between awareness and mindfulness is that awareness is a noun and mindfulness is a verb.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the awareness is that which knows. Okay. And the mindfulness is the moment to moment knowing of an object.
Got you.
That's the difference.
I'll not add to this. I'll let you go because you need to boost. So
Oh yeah, thank you. Okay. So,
thanks.
so I'm gonna I'm gonna screen share the second half of the video. Okay. And then I'll be traveling with all of you in the car. So there's gonna be two Ryans in this call. You guys are hanging out with my other self, the me from the past. Okay, let's see. Damn, I'm late. Something just never changed, Marco.
You're beyond time. I have the same problem. Notoriously have the same problem. Like people know me for that. That's just what happens. You're timeless spaces. That's what happened. Part of the package. Be annoying for other people.
Exactly.
My ex. Well, at some point, I just set my alarm for everything.
One second, everyone. Wow, this video quality is surprisingly good. I'm impressed. All right, so this was going to be the recording for the second half of the class today. So earlier we just discussed attention, intention, awareness, consciousness. Some of these basic terms that are really important just to understand, so that the framework of practice is sensible, just so that it's an understandable thing. So hopefully some of you have started on Mind Illuminated, that you've made it read up to the chapter that explains the first stage of tranquility, the first stage of meditative calming, the first stage of 10. And we're not going to cover that yet, because there's even more fundamental basic things to get into. So how does the meditative process work, and how is it related to awakening? You've heard me state that the calming or tranquilization of mind, or the stabilization of attention, can be part of the awakening process, but is not necessarily something that causes or produces awakening. So what is the point of doing this then? Why are we doing this? It's that by training attention and by developing meditative skill, there's a specific condition that usually precedes awakening. Not always, but it usually does. And this is often referred to as the pointing out of the nature of mind. And although it's not directly related to the development of jhana or cessation, it does have a role, or it can have a role. And in Culadasa's Mind Illuminated, the direct pointing is introduced at a specific stage. I think it might be stage 7. So so the idea is that at some point it becomes evident that the nature of your mind is continuous and uninterrupted. The nature of experience is continuous and uninterrupted. The word samadhi in Buddhism refers to the development of of meditation practice using an object. It also can refer to the attainment of a jhana. So it refers to the path and refers to the fruit. This one term, samadhi. In meditative training, samadhi means collectedness of mind. So our usual state, our usual condition, is that our attention is fractured. It's distributed over a variety of objects, jumping from one thing to the next all the time, continuously distracted. Really, a huge part of this process is going to be the de-automization of your habitual patterns and habitual thinking via the introduction of mindfulness. Mindfulness we defined in the previous section. So by being mindful, by being aware, you're actually introducing a new faculty, a new condition into your moment to moment and waking experience. Now, the approach with mindfulness is different depending on the tradition. And in some approaches, a lot of effort is applied. And I'm going to explain before we even get into hindrances, before we even get into techniques, need to explain the right and effective view and approach to this. There's a good quote by Ryokan that goes something along the lines of your mind is the Buddha. If your cart is facing south, but you're attempting to reach a destination that is north, you'll never reach it. The approach with meditation that is most effective and accessible are approaches that emphasize letting go. So approaches that emphasize non-doing, a pure and a total resting, just allowing things to be what they are. There are practices and there are versions of jhana. There are approaches that are retreat specific, and those employ quite a bit of effort. The reason I don't recommend them usually is because of the amount of frustration they produce when you're attempting to do them off of retreat. This is crucial because I spent 7 years trying it this way. I spent 7 years doing various concentration practices without the necessary conditions. And it's one thing to do the practice just as an exercise in attentional training, but it's another thing to actually be attempting to enter samadhi, deep samadhi, outside of the right conditions. And what do I mean by right conditions? I mean silent retreat often. So, so there's a pain of not being able to enter, right, or supposedly attain the things that you think you're supposed to attain. You know, that causes a degree of suffering. So the frame needs to be that your meditation practice is just getting out of the way, just allowing things to be exactly as they are. And if whether you're using an object or not using an object, you want to have that same frame. The less that you're doing, the less that you're involved, the more that this nature, the more that your true mind will be recognized. You know, you want to get to the point in the practice, you want to arrive at the truth that this is doing itself. This process is doing itself. And that's important because the less involved you are, the less you're attempting to control all of this, the greater wisdom and greater purification arises. It's really the attempt to control and the attempt to fabricate. I want it to be this way. I'm going to be upset if it's not this way. That's really the crux of not only suffering, but it is actually what bars a person from entering deeper levels of samadhi or falling into cessation. It's that self, this self, that is the very thing that is the cause of all of our problems. I want this, I don't want that, etc., etc. So the framing needs to be set in place, and the framing is go let be. That is the frame. However it is that you practice, whatever it is that you practice, get out of the way. Meditation is like an ocean analogy. A lot of organization use this particular example. So the the conceptual thinking mind, where analysis and investigation and meaning is occurring, is at the surface, where the waves are quite noticeable and intense. And that's where most of us live. That's where we are most of the time, where I need to do this, I need to do that, I need to go here, I need to go there, remembering this, remembering that, planning, executing, all of that, right? So that's all at the surface. There's quite a bit of turbulence. Now, straight down into the depths, the water becomes still. At the bottom of the ocean, the water is completely still. So it's only turbulent at the surface. So when you practice, when you do sitting practice or walking practice or any practice in general, when you allow the technique to do itself, when you get out of the way, when you stop attempting to control, when you follow the instructions, when you let go, when you allow things to be exactly as they are, whether with an object or whether without an object, the enlightenment factors, equanimity, tranquility, all of these begin to mature as this sinking down into the into the bottom occurs, this sinking into the depth occurs. The nervous system calms down, the body calms down. All of these things become tranquil, they all cease, and as that happens, the deeper nature emerges and becomes recognized. There's nothing that you actually have to do, but there does have to be a sitting, meaning that you have to set the conditions correct so that this calming process actually happens. It's already the case that you're the bottom of the ocean. It's already the case that this deep stillness is there. That this more fundamental awareness, this more fundamental presence is the case. It is there. But because our attention is always at the surface and because we don't have the right approach and we haven't given it sufficient time, we never sink to the bottom and experience deeper silence, deeper stillness. Samadhi and meditation emphasized in this fashion for the development of jhana, or experience of jhana and then cessation. The point is that calming, letting go, tranquilization occurs to such an extent that the mind gradually becomes incapable of grosser functions. So you're at the surface here, and this is where all your conceptual elaboration is happening and all of your concerns and all of your attachments. At the depth of your mind, those concerns and elaborations are not there. They just exist at the surface. So how it works is you let go, you do nothing. Like, imagine this is a rose in a water bottle, but imagine this water bottle was full of sediment, and It's full of dirt and sand, and you shake it up and you can't see through the water. You just set the water bottle down. Don't do anything. You just set it there. You just leave it. I mean, if you disrupt it, if you move it, it moves the sand. But if you just set it down, leave it, the sand eventually settles, and you can see the clarity of the water. You can see right through the bottle. That is exactly what we're doing with this, with jhanas. You set the conditions right, approach the meditation object right, set it down, do nothing. And next week we'll be going over how to do nothing, right? you can say do nothing, but how do you do nothing? How do you not do? There is an approach for how to not do, and that will all be explained. So you set the bottle down, the sediment begins to calm, the sediment begins to settle at the bottom, and the jhanas are like that. Each jhana, as you progress through them, you're becoming calmer and calmer and calmer and calmer and calmer, more released, more let go, deeper into the depths of that ocean. And then eventually the non-doing and the non-action reaches a culmination, and that culmination is falling out of oneself completely. So that's the approach. Any other thing I could think of? Well, so I should still be in the room listening to this, which is interesting. And if for those of you that have time, since you've probably left the next hour open, you can use this for meditation and just leave when you like. The Zoom will remain open, so it's a good time to sit. I will be sitting, but I'm just gonna leave the phone on in the car because it's with a group indoors, and I'm not leading it either, and it was like a difficult to explain. It was like an impromptu thing. Okay, so enjoy the sit, and I will see all of you next week. Yeah, so the Zoom will remain open for another hour. All right, everyone. All right, everyone. So can take a break and come back and sit, or enjoy the rest of your day and evening, and see all of you next week. Of course, if you have any questions, put them in the chat, and I'll answer them in the Discord. Yeah, I changed the meditation and non-duality section of the Discord to Jhanas and sensation. So you can just put any questions or experiences in there. So, yep, next week we'll get into mindfulness and its obstructions, which are the hindrances. So, yeah, we'll get to that then. All right, everyone.